So hello everyone and welcome to this live webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Raquel Rodriguez, the events manager here at Security Compass and your host for today's webinar. Before we get started with the content, I'd like to give you a quick overview of Security Compass. For those of you who may not be aware of us until today, Security Compass was founded in 2004 and began with a team of experienced penetration testers. Today, we have come far and work with many large enterprises globally to manage their cybersecurity risk through balanced developed automation. We have three key offerings. Our flagship product, SD Elements, enables organizations to manage software security without slowing down development through automation. Our modular role-based e-learning solutions empower organizations to embrace DevSecOps. And lastly, our strategic advisory services offer expertise in cloud security, pen testing, and red teaming for a better security position. Let's quickly go through some housekeeping items. As you might notice, you have all entered the session on mute to reduce background noise. Second, a recording of this webinar will be available after today's event, and you'll receive an email with the link to that recording. We will also publish this recording in the resources section of our website. Also, we encourage everyone to raise questions, so please submit your questions into the Q&A chat and we'll address them during the Q&A session. Lastly, if you'd like to follow up with us or if you have a topic you would like to see covered in a future webinar, please email us at contact@securitycompass.com. For today's webinar, we're going to take a close look at the business value of security and DevSecOps. I'm pleased to be here with Altaz Villani, Director of Research at Security Compass, and Hassan Yasser, Technical Director at CMU. At Security Compass, Altaz is responsible for managing the overall research vision and team. Hassan Yasser leads an engineering group to enable, accelerate, and assure transformation at the speed of relevance by leveraging DevSecOps, Agile, Lean AI/ML, and other emerging technologies to create a smart software platform and pipeline. Oops. Sorry about that. Alrighty, Altaz and Hassan, thank you for being here with me today. I know our audience is keen to hear your presentation, so I'll let you take it from here.
That's great. Thanks, Raquel. Appreciate that. So just to let everybody know, the way that we intend to run this webinar today is we'd like to make it interactive. So Hassan, maybe if you've got a whiteboard or something we can put up. And the way that this is going to run is it will be conversational. We invite you to please feel free to put your thoughts, your questions inside the Q&A panel or in chat. And let's keep this interactive and dynamic as we go forward. So I think before we kick this off, it's important when we consider this whole idea of the business value and what's the business value of security. Many times we find the discussion focuses on the technical elements of security, and and we really get kind of caught up in the tooling side of things. We'd like to bring that up a little bit for the business that will be investing in this. What value are they actually finding in security activities and in security teams and security programs? So Hassan and I have been chatting for some time about this, and one of the things that we've seen emerge in this discussion is the idea of a value stream. Hassan, do you have some thoughts on value streams, kind of what they are, what you're seeing, and maybe we can open up the conversation based on that?
Thanks, Altaz. Thanks for having me in here. I think it's a good thing. So we have to start what the value stream it is, because when we talk about the business value or the security value, we have to really tie the concept of value streams. So what the value stream is actually is a series of steps that an organization uses to achieve any type of solutions that the customer will use it. So what that means, like if I'm delivering an application and what needs to be done to deliver an application, all the steps are described of the value streams. That steps can be changed from application to application, maybe systems to systems. And mainly when we focus on the value of the organizational thinking, it's not just a one component. You may have a multiple component of the systems. So it's a more efficient way to describe, like when we build up a system, there's a hardware pieces in it, there's a software pieces in it. Maybe having kind of like a Greek representation here. So let's say we have some concept we start at the beginning in terms of like what we are planning to do. So I hope, yeah, that should be good to go right now. I'm going to create a new one. No, I can't drive. So if I have any type of capabilities, I'm going to start at the beginning. Then my customer will use at the end all the steps to achieve this capability to the customer that we'll see. We call the value streams. So, but they may be more than one value streams we are talking about, because building a capabilities may have multiple different steps needs to be done. So multiple steps that maybe like, think about the one general examples. If I'm building a device, right? That device and has some web application, web component in it. There is a kind of embedded systems is running inside the device as well, okay? So both of them has its own value streams we are talking about, but all of them are kind of talking to each other in one way or another. So all the steps needs to achieve all this work because of value streams to achieve all the steps. That's we can start. So now maybe we can dive into the more specific things like what that things in terms of security. Like typically organizations are defining with respect to the steps, with respect to the cutting requirements and talking about architecture, talking about design, and deliver a value to the customer. So the customer will see and use this one. So the value has the kind of potential elements in it in terms of data, in terms of the cost, in terms of all the requirement that customer will see it and use it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The discussion actually commences and starts off initially by looking at what's the value to the customer, and then based on the value to the customer, we kind of drive backwards and look at what are the activities that we need to undertake to go in and kind of build out this this program. So I think actually it might make sense. Raquel, we have a poll on for the audience. Maybe we can just ask the question on whether their organizations practice value streams today, which is starting from the customer end and then moving this and seeing, sort of working backwards to see what are the activities that we are looking at that will offer value ultimately back to that customer. Is it possible to put that poll up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. Okay, so if folks could just reply to that, and let's see what we are seeing out there. And it's interesting, while we're waiting for people to fill out that poll, looking at it from the perspective of steps, it's now becoming very relevant to consider all of the activities that are happening inside a DevSecOps pipeline. And eventually we'll talk about the how we integrate pipelines with value streams and kind of what the interaction is between the two. But from what you've just described now, Hassan, I think looking at the customer and putting the customer at the center of this and driving it backwards, because the business is focused on things like speed to market or brand and reputation and things like that, which are driven by the way that the customer perceives the organization, it's having an impact now on how we're conducting software development. And there's much more we can talk about this later on around, compliance and risk and things like that. But perhaps, so maybe Raquel, if you can show us what the results of the poll were, let's see. So we've got, does your organization practice value streams? 44% yes, and 33% partial. Hassan, your thoughts on the results of the poll?
It's kind of like the typical things I'm expecting to see that. And when I have similar questions in many other events, I see the similar ways. Because sometimes, even when you are building a software, always we do some steps in it. We may not define the value streams, and I kind of like getting a partial answer. And also using a very strict kind of like safe or other type of value streams process as kind of under the agile framework, that's kind of expected result. And no, maybe they're just starting probably and limited to only the CI and CD perspective. So it's expected result that I see that here. So it's good to have some awareness of the participants, and we can discuss more in details.
Yeah. One other thing that I'm seeing in the work that I've been doing with the Open Group as well is when we talk about value streams, it's really looking at it from a high level. What are the expectations of the business within the security teams, for example? How can we deliver things that enable the business to manage this portfolio of activities, and how is this going to kind of work from a risk standpoint? Um, I think it's a good segue now for us to start to consider, who does what exactly in a value stream. So we've got stakeholders, we've got certain artifacts in there. So I guess we can, yeah, thanks, Raquel. So just looking at it from the standpoint of a value stream, can you dive a little bit deeper into value stream and start to give us some insights into stakeholders? Clearly, it's not a single group or a single individual. It has to be cross-functional. But what are your thoughts on this?
So I think let's go back to our drawing board again here. So we are building any capabilities or any type of work, which is kind of giving a value to the customers. The steps are, let's give one example here, like the device that we were giving. So steps, we will define one example, like get the requirements and get a compliance as part of requirements, and talking about design elements. And typically, it's a typical SDLC, or the system lifecycle, like dev, and then test, and then deploy, and then after that is operate.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at this example to building up a value that originally customer will use it in this stage, in an environment right here. So we need to get to talk with all stakeholders are willing to say, or they're part of the overall thinking. So like requirements, typically we should have the business analyst here, and then the customer, of course, should be part of it here. And then talk about the compliance perspective here. So we can get whoever is generating requirements should be part of the discussions. Because we are building the steps, right? Steps is getting requirements. When we go to design phase, what are the steps we're going to go into design phase? What needs to be done? Such as, are we going to use the existing framework? Are we going to use any type of dependencies? Are we going to use such platform that we already acquired? Or maybe you're going to use this different hardware pieces, example. Maybe you're going to get some vendors products. So get all the requirements for the design phases here, and who are the stakeholders are. So maybe the architects or system architect, we can list it here. Maybe the security architect, we can list it here. My writing is perfect, by the way. So I'm using my mouse, by the way, so I'm not using a pen and pencil. If I'm in the class, I should get a better write-up. But so we have to think about who are the stakeholders for each of the steps. Like developer is basically developer here, and then testers. So we can really expand that the people. So I don't want to give a lot of name, but what we're expecting to achieve any certain goals of each phases, who are the people that we need to collaborate, and then who are the people do the actual work. Okay, so like who we collaborate to work, who are the people will develop or the work, right? So I can put a collaboration here, and then who are the people are actually testers and users. So organization should list that type of stakeholders and then let them work together, because the steps may change. And also we have to look at the level of the things that we are building, like a small increment, small features. Because as I said at the beginning, we may have more than value streams we have. We have more than one to achieve some systems. So that goes back to like agile thinking as well. So now we are generating multiple pipelines, maybe to discuss, but all the steps and all these value streams can be applied in a single pipeline, in an example like software or system delivery pipeline. Again, pipeline can be expanded, so we can expand more, but what we are saying, like we should get the people are part of this, the creation of the systems or building a systems and deploying system should be part of the discussions. And what are we really generating each of the steps? We are generating so much artifacts, like requirements generating many artifacts, maybe like requirements documentation, design is generating design related artifacts, and then maybe scripts, and dev teams are generating code with the deployment scripts, deployment components, configurations, all this artifact has been generated as a result of each activities. But all of them are really connected to the customer value. And then main purpose of actually having a value streams mapping to eliminate any type of waste. When I say the waste, we don't want to create some very rigid requirements, not including the design elements, not including stakeholders, creating a waste. So waste means like we may not be able to use one of the requirements because we did not have a relationship, we don't have actual requirements. Maybe we don't have a good communication with the customers. We get something requirements, but it's not really, there's no value of the customer. If there's no value for customer, it's becoming a waste. And same thing is true for the dev team as well. And if you are creating a code, which is there's no value for the customer, it's becoming a waste. So we would like to eliminate any type of waste in terms of spending more time or delivering a capability which is not used. And it's really more, not used for customers, it could be bad for the customer as well.
Yeah, it makes sense because even when we take a look at what's happening, let's say typically in the design stages, for example, in the design stages, usually we'll go in and we have a team that will conduct, let's say, some kind of threat modeling as an example. They take that, they then move it over, and we've got a dev team that's going to take a look at this, but sometimes the dev team uses it, maybe sometimes they don't. Similarly, if we take a look at what's happening in the requirement stage, we've got requirements, we've got policies that get injected in, and people look at the policies and they're like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do with the policy. So there's, even though our intent is to produce this efficiently, and there's a lot of talk on Agile and DevOps, but if you take a step back and you explore this from a business value perspective, we seem to be tripping over ourselves as we try to overlay security and inject, in fact, security into the pipelines that we've got. And I think it's important to distinguish at this point the sort of the nuance between value streams and pipelines. Right. In a pipeline, generally, we're looking for a series of activities that is automated, that takes you end to end. So generally, we've got CI or CD or continuous testing. These are things that are hands off. When we're looking at it from a value stream perspective, it kind of goes one step above that. And we see things from a value stream perspective where it's now the exchange of the artifacts. How useful is that? It doesn't matter that we've used automation to help us generate that, but could we in fact make use of that with teams that need to take a look at that later? And the challenge with DevOps is it's not just one way, but there's a feedback mechanism that comes in. And so the data that's coming in, let's say from SecOps, all right, are there a lot of false positives that are coming out as a result of that? And how can we minimize that? What are ways to filter those types of things? I think that's really important for us to kind of distinguish as we take a look at that. And I see you drawing something on the whiteboard here, Hassan. You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm just going back to you said the pipeline. So like the pipeline concept, which is typical DevOps thinking, like build, plan, build, test, and deploy, the infinite circle. But behind the scene, we use the continuous integration, continuous delivery concept. So maybe we can open up a little bit more. So when we build up the pipeline, so pipeline has an issue tracking system as an example, right? And then there is a repository management. And then also the different type of test harnesses. And then there is a staging environments. And also there's a kind of a deployment of production environment. So these are maybe that environment we are talking about, each of them. Repository management, test harness, and then staging, and then deploy environment. So this is our basically process, the value streams we do. It's kind of DevOps way, right? We plan, we build, and test, and deploy. But how we use that, all this process is using a continuous integration as a key point. And then we're using a continuous delivery generated from any artifact from integration that goes into our production environment. So when we look at the typical security here, we usually do the security on the testing phase sometimes, and sometimes in the build phases. Maybe like doing some static analysis on checking the build, pre-build or post-build or testing. Late, sometimes we do the pen testing as well. So they're all disconnected as the work-wise. So we can dive in more. Like when we do the static analysis in the build process, pre-build. So we are using many type of tools, static analysis tools like 45 any tools. And we're generating a lot of results of this analysis of the tools. What does it really affect our plan, right? What does it really affect the customers? Question is value, which is a dollar associated, right? Do we really do that work or not? So typical work right now, as I said, we are doing a lot of static analysis part of the CI server. We do some check on the pen testing and the continuous delivery deploy phases. And big question is, we have to answer, what is the really value of the secret analysis we do with respect to the things that we are building? I know our intent to have a customer use it. What is the associated cost of the secret features? Because it's important, as you know that Altez, and a lot of static analysis codes are generating so many data for us in terms of the alerts. But which one is the valuable for us? Which one is the high risks? Which one we have to take care of? And same thing, if I'm using a, let's go open up a little bit more. Let's say if I'm using a container as an example. So I put everything in my container as part of my test cases. I'm deploying to my environment. So in the container, I have so many other dependencies in my containers. So if I use any type of analysis tools to analyze my container with respect to security, I may get tons of results, right? So many results I will get it. So results are, which one is high risk for me? Which one do I have to take care of?
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I'm seeing out there as well. If I take a look at ultimately looking at what's this area here you talked about, what's the value from a DevSecOps perspective? There's this idea where we have to still move quickly. The business is not waiting. There are pressures external to the organization. And at the same time, we need to manage risk. And there's a sense of responsibility on how we're going to do this. And that's where the security side comes in. And it's interesting that even though historically we've seen a focus on development largely on the production of artifacts, what's emerging now is this almost like a balanced development idea that's coming in now. So how do you go in and how do you balance risk and how do you balance speed and kind of put these things together, which I think is what you're alluding to as well.
Agreed. I completely agree, because now when we answer the question at the beginning of the value streams concept, the customer is looking for the impact for me. So if you're able to tie a reason of any secret analysis with respect to the cost that customer will appreciate it, now there is a reason, there is a why we have to do it. Because I see a disconnect, because if I ask any question for our customers, I have been in many trainings or the courses, it's very hard to justify the reasoning, the spending money for securities, because it's not really a thought, it's not really as advice sometimes from the customers or the business perspective, because we never really get the security people, our team of the stakeholders. Let's go back to the first drawing here. We said the stakeholders, but stakeholders should include the security as well.
Yeah. I think this might be a good point. Raquel, if we could put up that second poll on articulating the value of security to the business. So if folks could just take a moment to answer that poll while we continue our discussion here. I think now when we begin to take a look at each activity, historically, we've been optimizing really around specific activities within the SDLC. But what's happening is there are certain pieces of information that cut across the entire pipeline, and compliance and security requirements become some of those things. Now, I think, when we take a step back and try to peel away, why is it that security and DevOps are really not able to fit together efficiently? Like, it takes some effort to make this happen. If we look at the value streams themselves, the way that historically security has been done has largely been driven through a series of controls. and these controls were based on certain requirements. Now, when you've got something that's moving, you have to wait until the security team has done their validation before you can keep moving forward. And therein, Hassan, lies this idea that you opened up with, which is around waste, right? Whenever we talk about value streams, the goal is to try and make this go as efficiently as possible through that value stream. So even though we may be, again, automating things, it's in the interactions between the teams where things begin to break down. Is this what you're seeing as well?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly what I said. The similar things Altez. And then actually maybe we can open up a little bit about the waste because we did not really cover up the waste with respect to security.
Yeah.
Right. So with like the security is we are testing the systems, but we should be really ready. And if anything happens in our organization with respect to the typical threats or the problems in our systems, we have to really look what are the possible risks are, so we can really spend our cost and money for a specific risk that we're addressing. And specific risk to the organization, because at the end of the day, we are tying to the value to the customers that they are paying the money for us. So we have to really spend the time based on the high prioritization of the security, the problems that we discover either through static analysis or the fuzz testings or the production or the pen testing as well. Look at which one is the high prioritization. Not the tool is saying high prioritization. What is the high prioritization for the business that we are in? That's a big question actually, because usually we are following and what the really tool does in this example, like during this phase of CI server, I'm using the data generating results. And then we have a prioritizations based on the tool is giving for us, right? So which one is a high prioritization or prioritization? That should be tied to our business value because we know which domain we are in. We know which domain we are part of it. So we have to really see the prioritization based on our risks. Then we can tie to our usage. So we have a spending our time and effort for analyzing the code and also spending the time for the dependencies. So one example, like in the container, we give an example in the container concept. If I have some dependencies that I'm using it, so in the dependencies, if one of the dependencies is not really as the critical component that in the actual application, I'm not using it, maybe as sub-dependencies, but it's not really used in applications. Do we have to spend the time to patch or the component, this one is high priority, or we have to spend that time more on SQL injection that's more obvious for our users, for our needs? I think there was a poll result came out. Let's look at the results yet.
Yeah, let's see. Are we able to pull anything up for the second question, Raquel?
Yep.
Let's see.
We see the result right now.
Yeah.
That's actually great to see that business value and related to the secret about the 44%. Some is 44. I'm sure there is a good justification of how much money we are spending because end of the day, somebody has to pay money. It's not, nothing is free, right? Somebody has to pay money, either the licensing cost of the tools that we are using here in this CI environment, or any type of spending time for developer has to work on it, or the architect that has to design on it. So if you know the cost of the relationship, then we have more justifications. So if you look at the overall, the industries and all of the experience, that's just kind of my side. And we don't, if you have enough time and money, the budget, we can build up a really resilient, secure systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have infinite time and budget.
Wonderful. So I think, looking at this idea now of value streams and how pipelines integrate with all of this, there's this idea now that emerges, and it's, even though we're focused on the end customer and we're trying to drive back from the end customer to a series of activities within our value stream, this idea that emerges around making sure that we are aligned we've got traceability, and this is where the intersection now sits between the value streams and what the teams are doing from the pipeline perspective. Many times the pipelines are executing, there are metrics that are radiated from these pipelines, but the challenge is when we go back to the value streams and we try and determine, are we in fact achieving what the business is looking for as value, that disconnect still exists. So for example, someone might come in and say, oh, we went and we found X number of potential vulnerabilities. That's great. We've radiated that information out. The question is now, what does that mean to the business? How does this tie into things like customer retention, or how does this tie into things like brand reputation, or speed to market, or things like that? And I think when we start to take a look at how value streams and pipelines begin to intersect together, that discussion is part of what necessitates a cross-functional team having to kind of have this type of a discussion, right? So that business value component at the end of the day is front and center. And for folks that are in the webinar, and even those that might be looking at the recording, if you're interested, you might want to take a look at some of the work, for example, that the SABSA Institute has been putting out as well. They do a fine job. They've been doing this type of thing for a while as well, and advocating for a business perspective to security. So, which is part of this discussion that we're having here today. And what we're trying to do is from a value stream and from a lean perspective, trying to inject these thoughts into how we might be able to get security and DevOps and DevSecOps kind of aligned in terms of how this is going to impact the business, but do it in a way that's measurable, right? Now, so I think one of the things that comes out many times is reusability of security artifacts. We spoke earlier, we touched very briefly on, let's say a threat model is created, the threat model is provided and kind of given to the developers. It's a data flow diagram, and many times that data flow diagram may or may not be useful. Can you talk a little bit, Hassan, about the waste that occurs in terms of us not being able to reuse artifacts? We spoke a little bit about the noise that comes in from the system, but are there things that we are also doing that perhaps, it's great, it makes sense perhaps in a given limited context, but has little value overall?
I think it's a good segue. I will continue this answer to that question, but before that, I would like to cover up a little bit in relationship with how we can achieve the value stream with the DevSecOps concept. So that
Sure.
we can give some example of the artifacts and how we can use that. Because so far we spoke about what it is, what the value streams are, what the stakeholders are, but how DevSecOps pipeline, the concept is really helping to achieve the value streams concept. Because
Sure.
we need to know how can we achieve this. I'm going to draw a couple diagrams here as well with my famous drawing again. So like, typically we discuss as the SDLs. So I'm going to put SDLs up here, requirements, and then design. Again, this is not a waterfall. This is a phases of the software and systems building. People are confusing. It's not a waterfall. This is how we achieve the stuff, and generating artifacts is a waterfall. But phases are the same. So it's not changing. And we're going to put a develop here, and then typically test, and also the deploy. So keep in mind, this is our SDLC we use. In a DevSecOps environment, so as I drew previously, so we have a repository management in the middle, okay? So we have issue tracking systems that we are able to keep track any type of cases.
Yeah.
Then we have different, so I'm going to make a connection, all the dot together. So we have test harnesses that we draw together. And then, so we have a build server. So I'm going to put a CI here. So we have monitoring systems that we typically use. And then, so we typically have a chat environment as well. So all these are technically connected to each other to repository management. So kind of not one direction, multiple directions, what we typically use. Okay. And then build server and test harnesses. And eventually we are deploying into the customer end. So this is kind of our production environment. So it's connected to a repository, but a different repository, maybe is an artifact catalog. So we can expand many others tools around this, drawing. So we may add more. I'm just putting a very minimal and must-have components. So as we said at the beginning, in the continuous integration, we do a build process, right? So in the build process, there is a pre-build, and also there's a post-build. So I'm going to open up what that means with respect to security. Pre-build with a lot of static analysis, right? This is the stuff we do right there. And then post-build, we do some dynamic analysis with the test and etc. or pen testings. When we do static analysis, what we would like to do, we would like to do incremental static analysis of the code that we are building. We don't want to re-analyze everything that we did at the past. So basically, we have to look at what has been changed based on repository management. We had a title of repository management, have a diff of the code that we are generated, and based on the issues in the case that our developer are working on it. So to connect the issues to the code that has been in the repositories and build it and do the static analysis incrementally on these portions. This is one. So now we are running the increment analysis based on the cases that we use related to the work that we are analyzing. So we don't want to spend more time or reanalyze what we have done at the past. That's why we can eliminate any type of waste of the static, and that's one example. Second, when we discover anything through dynamic analysis, again, dynamic analysis can be analyzing the containers, can be other components. If we already addressed any type of vulnerabilities on the dependence as an example, if we keep the history of the vulnerabilities in our case management or any type of environment, maybe a chat, maybe through the monitoring system, whatever the tools and techniques we are using it, so which is generating a data. So actually all of these components are generating data for us. If we're able to monitor and put to the vulnerability that we addressed, so we don't need to readdress again because it has been done already. However, we have to keep the history of this vulnerability that we analyze. That history can be part of our issue tracking system. History can be part of the chat room. Sometimes we can take a look at again. Maybe generating report then can go into our repository management. We can take a look back again. And you said at the beginning, traceable is a key point. So what we did, we applied this phases on SDLC into our DevSecOps environment. I call it DSO, short abbreviation. So we're able to achieve all the steps by using series of automation tools. Okay? Automation tools are like how you the case and connect the repositories and build a CI and deploy and all connected. Then we are doing an incremental basis. But our intent is always should be, end of the day, who's using my code into my production environments or the systems that I build it? Our customers are using it. So that's the intent. If I'm able to tie all my requirements and secret analysis related to the value of the customer, then we have a reasoning what to do. So going back to the way to eliminate artifacts, then we can eliminate artifacts by knowing what we have done at the past and record it and take a look again the next time when we analyze the systems one more time. So we can have an incremental, and we are building a knowledge. We know that Alta security is, it's a kind of like a instant in a moment. We are talking about today that based on our knowledge, our system is secure. Nobody can guarantee our system is secure for tomorrow, but we are trying to build up a resilient systems, okay? So resilient systems, like we are trying to build up a system that is running in our environment. If something happens to our environment, we should be able to go back in our pipeline and also in the process, which is our value streams like that, we should be able to address quickly again for any type of incident that we discovered. So traceable is a key point right now. How are we going to find out what we have done at the past? Do we have a history of the code? Do we have code repositories?
Yeah, it's interesting to see as well. As you talk about the process, what was going through my mind is, even though we're working backwards from the customer, really looking at how the customer is impacting what organizations are doing. As we work backwards, there are privacy concerns. We've got security concerns being really coming in from the customer group here, which is now something that ultimately ties to the value that is going to be offered to the business. And so we get into now the intersection of compliance with the software development lifecycle, and the two are beginning to converge at this point, to the point where now even the requirements that are coming in are not just technical requirements, but have injected into them compliance and legal and some of these kinds of things that ultimately are important to the business. And we need to show that when we're executing from a DevOps standpoint, that we are in fact providing this back to the business in the form of either resiliency or risk against breach of compliance or things like that. I think why don't we throw up a poll? I think we might have a question here related to compliance. It would be interesting to see whether folks are implementing compliance requirements in the DevSecOps pipelines today. And while we're waiting for people to respond to that, what I'm seeing is for the business, there are so many things that they've got that they need to kind of balance against to make sure that the individual value streams are contributing that value back to what's important around resiliency and compliance and brand and speed to market and all of these competing priorities. I think it affords the business an opportunity now to make certain decisions based on data that's coming to them on what they think is important. And now that this data is in front of them, it is defensible, it is traceable, and organizations can now make, or at least the senior stakeholders within organizations can make a decision on how they want to move forward in terms of plan of action on risk mitigation, for example. So Raquel, if we could just sort of produce the results on that, let's see what we've got. Okay, so about 3/4 are in fact implementing compliance requirements, and about 1/3 are not. This confirms what I'm seeing in the industry anyway, which is where compliance has started to already make its way into the software development lifecycle. Hassan, are you seeing similar things from your side as well?
This is actually a very similar result when I run a DevSecOps survey as well. And I saw that if organization DevSecOps environment, they're able to put the compliance into the environment much easier than the non-DevSecOps or non-DevOps organizations. Because by the nature of this, the DevSecOps pipeline, it's giving a capability for us to implement any compliances. But we are not doing it, but it's already available. When you look at the compliances, like how much with the traceability, with the GDPR, we're asking about for the traceability, how we're handling the data and which phases and who our developer are touching. Similar question is also true for the SOX. Like if I am a developer, I'm able to look at the production environment or not. So basically having a traceability and also audit log is a way to generate the data from the pipeline. So what I'm saying, like if you have a pipeline is ready, if you have full DevSecOps environment ready, it's much easier to get compliances, which is convenient. A similar result I have been seeing right now, and also the DevSecOps survey too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'd like to see if we can land this now. We only had an hour to have a discussion on this, but I'd like to start to think about what are some practical steps that people can take, that organizations can take now, given this discussion we've had on value streams and pipelines and compliance and risk and all of these things. We've touched on things like repeatability, making sure it's defensible, and there are a whole slew of topics that emerge from that, but just sort of keeping this at a high level and considering what are some of the things that organizations should be looking at. We oftentimes have found that technical teams don't talk to people on the business side. And maybe, that would be something worth considering. In fact, why don't we throw up that other poll that we've got here, Raquel? And while that poll is going on around having a discussion with folks on the business side, Hassan, you want to talk about what are some concrete, like some steps that people can take to help bridge this gap now?
Yeah, thank you. I'll do that. So I'm going to use my drawing board again to make it much easier to the folks. and they can see that in the write-ups. So I'm going to open up the page again. So we have actually, when we start the process, we have to go two-dimensional actually. One, having a tooling is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
We have been talking about the cultural a lot. Maybe we haven't really covered up today, but typically we would like to build up a cultures and based on what the things we are building. So I'm going to draw a diagram here. So and then I put a like a first step is a repository management. So when I say repository management, it's not just putting a code into the repositories. I would like to start from the first level because we said we're going to generate artifacts. We are generating a lot of artifacts for the systems, reports and write-ups and notes and everything else. So start from repository management, and then, so by the way, we got the result on the business. So we see about the on-demand. On-demand is a good answer, actually, 57% I would like, but we like to communicate more. So I'm going to explain more in this here. So like why we are building the overall thinking, I would like to get one angle to improve our process, which is our culture. That's the reason we have to talk with our business manager a lot. Another side is improving our tool stacks. So when I see typically Altes, people are spending more time in this section, getting a lot of tools, but we are ignoring this section. Like we don't have a right culture, we don't have a value stream tied into our business. We have to go gradually together. Like how we are building a repository, one example, maybe start from the tools and try to build up a relationship. Who are the stakeholders we have to get into the talk, right? Stakeholders. When we talk about the stakeholders, ask the questions. What type of tools are they going to use? Maybe Jira, maybe case management, maybe wiki pages, right? That's what we start. Build up a collaboration tools right here. Then when we go to the next level, let's say we are building a systems. Now, when we build up a systems, maybe we can talk about the CI and the continuous integration. So now tie back to who are my stakeholders will see the result of my CI servers. Again, build up the maybe communications, then we're going to talk about this concept. And how are we going to communicate? How are we going to share the result of my CI server testing results? So like with respect to security, we don't want to get the security testing only goes to the security people. We would like to send a report to all the other stakeholders that we can communicate well. So what we are doing actually, we are increasing our process with the value streams thinking, how we get it done. At the same time, we are maturing our tools are parallel together. So technically, there is no endpoint here, and it's going to be continuously. So we can get better and better and better, use the better tools, better techniques. At the same time, we are creating a good way of doing the business. So eventually, we have a better cultures, better teams, right? And then more awareness of the work. And also we are building a more impactful to the customers. So if we have a good way of mechanism to handle the response, like if something happens, of course something will happen in our production environment. How can we respond is important to any incident. And then based on the result that we run this year, organizations are more capable to respond any incidents in an environment Altes. They are better if they have a good tooling aligned with the right process.
Yeah.
Right. It has to be
yeah.
true. So as we remember, the DevSecOps means like a set of practices and process. It is not a tool. It's a set of practices and process. But what we should do, what we have been saying so far, why don't we tie whatever work we do for organizations as an advice, start from the baby steps and then go better and better. If you have something, you will establish a good DevSecOps environment that you have in your organizations, you have a great, ask the questions. All the stakeholders, are they able to use this environment? Yes or no? If there's no, there's something wrong with this pipeline creations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to quickly inject, this area that you've got in here, I think is is really, really important. In there lies the mapping that exists between what's coming out from the tools and what is required by folks on the business side. And as we are looking at this, there's almost like a building up of a knowledge base where people can go in and there's an acquisition of understanding that happens where we've got people on the technical side beginning to understand what the business is looking for and vice versa. And I think that helps and goes a long way towards trying to streamline, the value stream that we're talking about and trying to reduce the waste that exists. So we're not spending time creating something where we're extremely busy, but it actually offers very little value. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but I just thought this was important to call out.
100% I agree with Altas. That's why I said that, getting a pipeline or building a DevSecOps environment, it is ready. You can go buy anywhere else. It's easy. You can buy. But how we can use, it's a million-dollar question. Are we able to use effectively? When we get more specific with security, it's more even important. How can we tie our security activities, which is the domain specific, which is organization specific, and then utilize that platform? It's very important to us. So usually, as I heard so far, this is kind of ongoing study as well, dev people are using this environment. It's great, but we often ignore the other stakeholders. The other stakeholders are business is important. Important to have a business manager as part of it, because we have to, maybe a kind of a joke, but this guy has the money, right? We have to really tie to the business people how much money we are going to spend. They have to know that. They have to plan it. But when we ask that question, how much money we'll spend, we should have a data.
Yeah.
So going back to our first drawing, we are generating data somewhere in this pipeline. So data can be generated from each of these activities. So based on the data, we can feed back to our team members and get maturity, get understanding, get building the systems, secure systems based on what we learn. It's an organizational learning. It's organizational thinking around that line. So we can really ask the right questions from our business managers. How much money I'm going to spend based on how much we did at the past. Here's the result we achieved it. And tying back to our operation environment and see the impact of the security analysis, how much we are able to address any vulnerabilities or any attacks running in the production environment. That's kind of like a maturity level we are talking about. If I'm able to generate any type of data in my production environment, maybe ultimate case, that goes back to the team automatically using other techniques in ML AI or anything else and giving an indicator to the business perspective so we can have a better protection, better prediction for the futures. Do we have a resilient systems or not? Because that's kind of history what we have done at the past.
Wonderful. That's great. Well, we're coming up to the end. I think folks, please feel free to ask some questions at this point. Raquel, do we have anything in the pipeline? Any questions? Anything that's been coming in that you want to maybe put out? And let's see if we can have a discussion on that.
This is a DevOps way. Actually, we should have more collaborations with our participants, right? It's not just that both of us we are talking. We should have stage at the beginning. So it's more collaborations. It's not. Again, we are in the part of industries. We are looking for a more collaborative way. And that's one of the things like attending that type of webinars or attending any conferences to learn how other organization does. Let's see which one is applicable to us. Not really copy and implement it, more about adding something to the portfolio so we can do specifically within our organizational domain, organizational knowledge.
Cool.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Altaz and Hassan, for doing a deep dive on the business value of security and DevSecOps. That was great. So like Altaz mentioned, we are going to be opening it up to questions. So if you haven't had a chance to submit your question yet through the Q&A chat, please do so now. So we did get a few questions that came in. So I'll start with the first one here. Sometimes it seems like businesses change their mind frequently. Does that mean value streams are dynamic?
Yeah, go ahead, Hassan.
Great questions.
Yeah.
Yes, it has to be dynamic. It's a dynamic. So because going back to the drawings and we discussed so far, if we have a good pipeline concept, if I write right process, we should be able to answer questions or any business changes. That's the reason we would like to have a very dynamic, very agile way of addressing the business values, business component, because requirements may change. When the requirements may change, if it is changed early in the life cycle, you should be able to address quickly. Like if something got changed, if we have a fully DevOps environment, if I'm generating a test harnesses that user is able to see where I'm in as a result of my sprint, and then immediately user will say, oh, I didn't mean this one, I would like to have this capabilities. Now immediately I have to go back and change my requirements because of the process, which is my sprint or the scrum that I'm following up with visible to my users, my customers, my stakeholders. Immediately I will go and change it. Same is true for the compliance perspective too. If I see something, then I have to follow up with the HIPAA or the SOX. Then as soon as my login screen says it is opening up, maybe exposing some PII data from my login page or other pages, then my compliance auditor will see in my test harnesses, they can immediately have a reaction, change it. So actually the platform is giving that capabilities. And going back to the question, it's a dynamic and we have to address in the pipelines.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing is the response to this, given that the business can and should shift based on market conditions and maybe penetration of new markets or things like that, is to consider the activities that we do almost like a service that we're offering back to the business. Excuse me. Say, for example, we're considering threat modeling. What would threat modeling as a service look like? And it may or may not be used to various degrees, given a particular value stream. But if we consider it from that standpoint, then we end up with this value stream of services that are stitched together, and we can optimize them. For sure, what may have worked in the past may not work now, but if we look at it without tightly coupling these services together, but looking at sort of a decoupled set of services, it provides more of that agility that aligns with the business needs. And think about it from that perspective. Raquel?
That's great. So the next question we have here is, how does IT governance play into value streams?
So I can certainly take that, but Hassan, you wanna give your thoughts on this? Sure. So when we take a look at IT governance and the value streams, the intent of IT governance is to provide the guardrails, to make sure that we provide assurance back to the business. So this is the role that IT governance plays. So what will happen is part of a natural IT governance system or framework would be that we need to involve multiple stakeholders in this. Let's clearly identify what are the points of value for each one of those stakeholders. And then when we go and start to dig down deeper into our processes, what is it in terms of value to those specific stakeholders that emerge from that? Now, once we've got the artifacts, we then need to implement the guardrails that we were discussing. At what point is it going beyond a certain threshold? And typically the thresholds would be determined based on some risk criteria. And if it turns out that it goes above that criteria or falls below that, what are the circumstances that we would like, what are the mitigating issues that we would now start to unfold in order to address where we sit, because we've now crossed the bounds of what the governance model that has been set up will provide. And I think that's where a discussion like this is essential. When first creating your value streams, make sure you've got the right stakeholders in there. From there, you'll be able to create the right governance structures. It is important that the governance structures that are created for the value streams map to the overall IT governance structures, because those at a strategic level map to the capabilities that we're looking to provide to the business to help them move forward. So there are multiple levels, and all of these essentially connect amongst themselves. So Raquel, it looks like we're up against time at this point, but I just hand it off to you at this point.
Yes, for sure. So thank you so much again, Altaz and Hassan. That was a great session. Just to let everybody know, we do have webinars lined up for the next few weeks. So if you're interested in attending any of these webinars, please go to the upcoming events and webinar section of our website to sign up. We hope everyone found this presentation insightful. And again, we will provide a link to the recording of this webinar to everyone here via email. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. Please stay well and safe and have a great day.